This episode is brought to you by PDS Debt. Struggling with credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, or collections? It's time to stop worrying about that high-interest debt you've got piling up. PDS Debt can help you start saving money immediately. Their platform can analyze your unique situation and create a plan to get you out of debt. There's no minimum credit score required, and it takes 30 seconds to get your results. With PDS Debt, you'll take back control of your finances. Get a free debt analysis in just 30 seconds at pdsdebt.com/Spotify.
This is the FPL Draft Zone, your fantasy team's best signing of the season.
Gameweek 24 is almost done and dusted. Hopefully it was a good one for you and your draft team. Now attention turns to Gameweek 25 with a raft of new signings to waiver into your side. We've got a full preview and our suggested picks coming right up. Hello and welcome to the FPL Draft Zone, a podcast all about, yes, you guessed it, Draft FPL. I am Dom Croft, I hope you are well, and today we're going to be looking ahead to Game Week 25, the first full set of top flight fixtures since the end of the January transfer window. We'll also be giving you our picks for this week's waiver priority list. That is all coming up in just a few moments' time, but before we get started, I just wanted to remind you all to subscribe to this pod if you have not already. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss an episode. It would also be great if you can leave a review for us on whatever podcast platform you do listen to us on. That really helps to put us on the map, and it will help to grow our listenership as well, which will then allow us to make more of these shows on a more regular basis. So if you do like the show, do us that little favour, give us a 5-star review, leave some nice words, tell your friends about us, hell, even tell your enemies about us. Anything you can do to spread the word about the FPL Draft Zone would be hugely appreciated. Right, no more faffing. Let's move on to Game Week 25, which this week starts on a Friday night, on Valentine's Day of all days, and it runs through until the following Wednesday. Last week's Game Week seemed to last forever, didn't it? And because of another Liverpool double game week, this one is going to run and run as well. As usual, we're going to take a look at the game week fixture by fixture. We're going to flag a few stats from previous meetings, and we're going to make a few recommendations of players you should be considering for your waivers. And that means that this week we are starting with that Friday night game between Brighton and Hove Albion and Chelsea. These two sides met at the Amex in the FA Cup this weekend just gone, a game which Brighton won 2-1, having lost their previous fixture in the league 7-0 at Nottingham Forest. It was a relatively close game, this one, between the two sides. Brighton edged the XG, Chelsea dominated possession, but they failed to create one big chance of note, whereas Brighton managed to create two, and they scored 2 goals. In the league game at Stamford Bridge earlier in the season, it was the Cole Palmer show as he scored all 4 goals for Chelsea in a 4-2 win. And last season he scored the opener in the game at the Amex as well, another game which Chelsea won 2-1. In terms of waiver options for this one, the Chelsea goalkeeping situation is an interesting one to keep an eye on. Enzo Maresca has been fiercely supportive of Robert Sanchez all season long, despite him making more errors leading to goals than any other keeper in the league. But in their last league game, that support seemed to dry up and Philip Jorgensen started ahead of Sanchez. Sanchez was back in goal for that FA Cup defeat, but that seems to suggest that Maresca has flipped his league and cup keepers around and that Jorgensen will now be first choice in the Premier League. It is not guaranteed, but it certainly looks like that may be the case. So if you want to root into that Chelsea backline, he could be a good waiver option. A word of warning though, Chelsea have only kept 3 clean sheets in their last 12, which is not great, but 2 of their next 4 games are home matches against Southampton and Leicester City, and those are 2 absolute A-list fixtures for draft managers to target. And with Chelsea's other defensive options likely taken already, I would be looking to pick up Jorgensen either this week or next week with those fixtures in mind. Chelsea's FA Cup team against Brighton was a bit of a second string side. It had the likes of Nkunku, Dewsbury Hall and Malo Gusto starting. Noni Madueke was on the bench with Neto and Sancho getting starts on the wing. Madueke has been by far the most prolific of those three from an attacking point of view this season, and I would expect him to come back into the side for this one. Enzo Fernandez was also rested in the Cup, so he will play too. And the Argentina World Cup winner continues to rack up XGI in the league. In his last 10 appearances, his total XGI has been exactly 4. And his returns in that time, well, guess what? 4. So he is averaging a return just over every 2 games. And that is not bad if you're in need of a 5th midfielder. As for Brighton, they went full strength in the Cup against Chelsea and looked a little more defensively solid. I would not be going for a Brighton defensive asset if I were you, but if a Minte is floating about on the waivers or even a Rutter, they have as good a chance as any of getting an attacking return. So that's the Friday game this week, and then the action really gets going on Saturday with the 12:30pm GMT game between Arsenal and Leicester City. Leicester have lost 8 of their last 9 in the league now, with their only win coming up against a very depleted Spurs team. Last time out in the league, they shipped 4 goals away at Everton. Arsenal, on the other hand, have been sunning it up in Dubai for the last week, and they've already scored 4 against Leicester once this season when they beat them 4-2 at the Emirates. Leicester's 2 goals that day came from an XG of just 0.27. It was the James Justin show, if you remember. And given the league positions and the form of these two sides, you would have to assume that Arsenal will waltz through this game once again. Now, since they last played in the league, they have lost Gabriel Martinelli, who got injured in their League Cup semi-final defeat to Newcastle, which means that now the front 3 of the Gunners kind of picks itself, and that means Ethan Nwaneri is going to get a lot of game time. So if he is still available on your waivers, he is a route into a very good Arsenal side and their attacking unit. He's got 7 goals so far this season. He's got 3 in the league in just 281 minutes, which works out at 3 goals in pretty much exactly 3 games. So currently he is returning on average in the league every single match. After Leicester, Arsenal have West Ham at home, which feels like another game they could score a few in. And then 2 game weeks later, they have Manchester United away, who right now are officially the Clown Car Football Club of the Premier League. So the fixtures are there for Nwaneri to get some good returns. And if he was available in my draft league, I would absolutely be snapping him up. Declan Rice is another player I've got my eye on this week. He seems to have nailed down that left 8 role for Arsenal, with Thomas Partey impressing as the number 6. He got 2 assists last time out in that 5-1 win over Manchester City, and he's been speaking out about it being his responsibility to up his goals and assists tally between now and the end of the season. He's currently got 1 goal and 5 assists so far in the league, and his XG figures pretty much match those returns. But when you look at big chances created by players across the Premier League, Declan Rice is surprisingly high. He's actually joint 4th for big chances created alongside Trent Alexander-Arnold. Only Salah, Cole Palmer and Saka have created more big chances this season than Declan Rice. He did have a slow start to the season following the Euros. He broke his toe as well, which didn't help his form. But he is someone who has started to look like his old self again. He needs to step up between now and the end of the season if Arsenal are going to have a successful season. And the signs are that he is starting to do just that. So with this Leicester game in mind, if he is free on your waivers, he is another I would be seriously thinking about getting in. There are 5 games at 3 o'clock on Saturday, and first up are one of 2 sides who have a double game week this week, and that is Aston Villa, who take on Ipswich Town at Villa Park. Villa also play Liverpool next Wednesday at home, and they had a very busy January. They brought in 5 new players, which means that there is now a lot of choice for us on the waivers this week to get in some Villa players. The likes of Marcos Asensio and Marcus Rashford made their debut in that FA Cup win over Spurs, and both look pretty good. I'd be happy to roll the dice on either of them ahead of this double, but with doubts over Ollie Watkins' availability, I would seriously be looking at Donyell Malen this week, who started up front in that game against Spurs. He has been left out of Villa's Champions League squad, which means that he is surely going to be getting a lot of minutes in the Premier League. Obviously, that Liverpool game is going to be a tough match for them, but Ipswich at home means that any route into that Villa front line is a good route. And if Malen starts as the number 9 again, he really needs to be extremely high up on your waiver list, and probably higher than any of his teammates. Jacob Ramsey is playing well at the moment, and I think he and Bailey will get the nod on the wings. Bailey was absolutely brilliant last season, scoring 10 goals and getting 11 assists. This season has been poor by comparison, but there seem to be signs that he is on his way back to something like that sort of form, because guess what, everybody? Villa fans have been making comps of his performance in the FA Cup and sticking it on Twitter. Yes, they've been making ruddy comps of Leon Bailey, and that is a surefire signal that surely he is about to explode into life. Possibly. Rashford and Asensio are the other options. They are probably more long-term signings in draft. I'm not sure either will start on Saturday. I'm not sure either will start both fixtures. But going forward, I think they will be strong pickups between now and the end of the season. And I would probably veer towards Rashford over the Spaniard as it stands. So it kind of depends on your league position as to who you go for this week. If it's a case of win now, I would definitely veer towards Marlon or Bailey. If you're thinking longer term, I would probably roll the dice on Rashford. Defensively, Aston Villa have been in a right old state for a few weeks now. Ipswich represents a good chance of a clean sheet, but I'm not sure I'd even bet my house on that. However, if you think they can keep out Liam Delap and company, then Disasi is almost certainly in your waiver pile, and he will almost certainly start in the absence of the likes of Pau Torres and Tyrone Mings. One clean sheet for him across this game week and an appearance against Liverpool, and you'd be looking at a pretty healthy 8-pointer from Disasi. Fulham take on Nottingham Forest at Craven Cottage, and this is a tough one to call. I think both teams will score, so if there are any Forest defenders available on your waivers, I would not rush to get them in. Their fixtures actually take a real turn for the worse over the next few weeks as well, with games against Newcastle, Arsenal and Manchester City in their next 3 after this one. Fulham have Palace, Wolves and Brighton after Forest, so that's a little bit kinder. And Emil Smith-Rowe seems to be back in favour again after missing a few game weeks of late. He scored in the win over Leicester in game week 22, and he is the sort of player who might be able to create something out of nothing against that solid Forest backline, and that might be what it takes to get a goal against Nuno's side. We did our transfer special last week as well, where we went through all the January signings and we flagged all our favourites, but one player we didn't mention was Willian, who has rejoined Fulham on a free transfer. He was excellent in his first spell with the club, and I am sure Marco Silva will not be afraid to throw him into the mix in this one. Overall, though, unless you already own a Chris Wood, an Anthony Robinson, an Elanga or a Jimenez, there really are slim pickings on the waivers for these two teams. Fulham beat Forest 5-0 in this fixture last season, with Iwobi and Jimenez both scoring twice, and they also won at the City Ground earlier this season, thanks to a Jimenez penalty. It's Manchester City against Newcastle at the Etihad. At the time of recording, City have not played Real Madrid yet, but with this fixture sandwiched in between their first and second legs, if that game is still alive after the first leg, you would have to question how much of City's focus is going to be on this Newcastle game. City have signed a midfielder. They signed him late in the transfer window. They brought in Nico Gonzalez from Porto. They will hope he can add a bit of solidity to the centre of the park. If he can't, though, and Newcastle play the way that they've been playing recently, you would have to fancy them to get a result here. They've already bullied Arsenal with that midfield 3 of Bruno, Joe Linton and Tonali. Joe Linton will miss this one, but that could mean Lewis Hall moves into midfield, as he did against Arsenal in that Carabao Cup semi-final. And if you own Hall, now might be the time to strike a trade for him. His value is high, he could be pushed further forward, and Newcastle's fixtures get tricky with City, Forest and Liverpool in their next 3. I would totally understand if you didn't want to lose him, but sometimes it makes sense to sell high and play the fixtures, and that could make Hall expendable. Other than that, Callum Wilson returned for Newcastle in their FA Cup win over Birmingham, and he scored, so if you need that mythical third striker option, he could be your man. He's out of contract at the end of the season as well, so he's certainly got a lot to play for over the next few months. It's a South Coast derby at St Mary's as Southampton take on Bournemouth, and this feels like the sort of game that Bournemouth could win very convincingly. Southampton have improved a little bit of late, but the Cherries are flying. They've lost just once in the league in their last 12 games. That was against the league leaders Liverpool, who they could easily have got a result against, by the way. So I think if you can get in on any Bournemouth assets this week, you are probably in for a good time. Adam Smith is almost back to full fitness, so keep an eye on Iraola's press conference for news on him. He could be worth picking up in free agency if it sounds like he's going to be available and he's going to start. He would give you a route into that Bournemouth backline. Marcus Tavernier may be available on the waivers after only recently returning from injury. He played 78 minutes in Bournemouth's FA Cup win at Everton. I don't know if he's going to start this one, though, ahead of David Brooks, because the general consensus from Bournemouth fans seems to be that Tavernier is not doing the business for them, and that could mean Brooks keeps his place in that starting 11. Either way, I think both will get minutes here, and I think both could very easily return against a side like Southampton, even in limited time on the pitch. So 2 offensive options for you there, both of whom could very easily still be in your waiver pile. And we mentioned a few weeks ago, but Bournemouth's run from now until the end of the season is absolutely outrageous. So if you think you can get in a Dango Ouattara, a Semenyo or a Kirkes as part of a trade deal, go and get it done, because the potential rewards are absolutely huge. After Southampton, Bournemouth have Wolves at home, Brighton away, Spurs away, Brentford at home, Ipswich at home, and West Ham away. Wolves, Brighton, Spurs, Brentford, Ipswich, West Ham. Those are 7 of the 8 teams in this league that have conceded the most goals this season. The only other team to concede more goals than those teams, or some of those teams, is Leicester City. So goals will be guaranteed for Bournemouth in those fixtures. And if you can get in on some of their attacking assets, you stand to win very, very big.
Canva presents the killer of productivity. It was an ordinary workday until...
Oh no, this meeting, it could have been an email.
Run. Canva had a creative solve.
Get email. I'll just put the info the team needs in a Canva doc, and I'll make it visual with images, charts, and graphics.
Bring productivity killers to justice with creativity. Love your work at canva.com.
It's West Ham against Brentford at the London Stadium, and all eyes will of course be on a certain Irishman named Evan Ferguson, who joined the Hammers on loan from Brighton on deadline day. West Ham have been without Fulkrug and Antonio for a while now due to long-term injuries, so the likelihood is that Ferguson is going to be a regular starter from now until the end of the season if, and it is a big if he can stay fit. In the last 2 seasons, he scored 6 goals apiece, exceeding his XG in both campaigns, and doing so in pretty limited minutes. West Ham are starting to look a little more polished under Graham Potter as well, and they do have great attacking options if he can get them going. So if Ferguson can stay healthy, he could really reap the dividends of playing alongside the likes of Paqueta, Bowen, and Kudos. And he's up against one of those sides that have conceded more goals than most. Brentford have conceded the 6th most goals in the league, so he should get opportunities this weekend. James Ward-Prowse has also returned to the Hammers after a fairly underwhelming loan at Nottingham Forest. His set-piece delivery has made him a decent draft asset for a number of years now, and if he can break into Potter's preferred starting 11, he could be a decent option too. He would be a risk to get this week, as we just don't know what Potter's plans for him are, but if you want to take that risk in the hope you get ahead of the curve, I certainly wouldn't blame you, particularly with a fixture like Brentford coming up. This one finished 4-2 to West Ham last season, with Jared Bowen hitting a hat-trick. The points were shared earlier in the campaign with a 1-1 draw at the G-Tech. It's Crystal Palace against Everton at Selhurst Park. This is a fixture that Everton have absolutely dominated of late, and there's not many sides you can say they do that against. They are unbeaten in their last 8 games against Crystal Palace, winning 5 and drawing 3. They beat them earlier this season at Goodison, thanks to a brace from Dwight McNeil. Last season's game at Selhurst Park finished 3-2 to the Toffees, with Mikalenko and Decore among the scorers. Beto is the standout option for Everton here, given his last league outing against Leicester when he scored twice. But Decore also scored in that game, and while he is far from prolific as an FPL asset, or as a footballer in general, he is a bit of a streaky player. He got 7 goals last season. 3 of those goals came in a spell of just 6 games, so he got 3 and 6. And another 3 came in a spell of 5 games, so he got 3 and 5. So of those 7 goals, he scored 6 of them in 11 games. So when he does break his duck, goals tend to follow. As for Palace, their away form has been far stronger than their home form. In their last 8 away games, they've won 5 and drawn 3, which is brilliant. Well done, Palace. But at home, they've only won 2 of their last 8 against Spurs and Southampton, and they've only kept 1 clean sheet in that time. So despite their upturn in form, I would not bet on them stopping West Ham from scoring. Having said that, Ben Chilwell represents a good attacking option in their defence. He got 45 minutes in their 2-0 FA Cup win over Doncaster, and while I think Tariq Mitchell will probably keep his place for now, I do think it's only going to be a matter of time before Chilwell breaks into that starting 11. On Sunday, it's Liverpool against Wolves at Anfield. Liverpool are the other team that double this week. Their players are, of course, extremely hard to come by on the waivers. But Connor Bradley could be an option if Trent isn't fit to play. We're recording this just before the Merseyside derby, so it may be that he's declared fit for that one and this is irrelevant. But I just wanted to put Bradley on your radar in case he does miss that game. McAllister could still be floating about on a few waivers as well. He's not the most popular player in draft. And see if there are any injuries that come out of that Merseyside derby, because that could then open up more playing time for a Curtis Jones or even a Tsimikas. But that is obviously a watch and wait. As for Wolves, well, a game at Anfield is not a game that they're going to win, is it? So they're a steer clear for now. The 4:30pm GMT game sees Manchester United travel to Spurs in a battle of the underachievers. Spurs are 14th, United are 13th. United's away form has been better than their home form, but that's not saying a lot. They've lost 5 of their last 6 at Old Trafford. Amorim has already taken his United side to Spurs in the Carabao Cup, where they were beaten 4-3 in a thriller. Spurs also won 3-0 at Old Trafford earlier this season during Erik ten Hag's reign, and they took 4 points from United last season as well. So despite Tottenham's injuries, I actually think this game might be one that takes the heat off Big Ange. I think they could easily get 3 points here. Matthias Tell did well for Spurs in that cup defeat to Villa. He got a goal after he was moved into that number 9 role, and I suspect he'll start there again for this one. Doubts over Richarlison's fitness remain. Tell has been classified as a midfielder in FPL, so he would be an out-of-position forward, which is always a nice thing to have in your squad. Brennan Johnson and James Maddison are both nursing calf injuries, so keep an eye out for the Spurs press conference for any news on them in case they've been dumped into the waivers. And Kevin Danso and Mickey van der Ven could be defensive options for Spurs if you are mad and you think they can keep a clean sheet at any point in the future. Van der Ven got an attacking return at Old Trafford in that 3-0 win earlier in the season. As for United, it's slim pickings for them as well. Maybe a Garnacho might be available, given he's not been a super regular starter of late. But Amorim has started to sing his praises a little more, so maybe that will change and he will get more game time. And despite their woeful form at Old Trafford, their away form is not awful. They have only lost 1 of their last 5 games on the road. They've drawn at Liverpool, and they've beaten Manchester City in that time. And then finally, of course, we have the extra game week fixture between Aston Villa and Liverpool. That one takes place on Wednesday the 19th of February. It is a massive game for Liverpool, one of the tougher ones they have left to play, and Villa now have some serious strength in depth to call on. Villa will be hoping that their defensive options improve in time for this one, given they are up against a certain Mo Salah. But in 12 home games so far this season, they have only managed to keep 2 clean sheets. And those games were against Manchester United and Southampton. So Liverpool will almost certainly score in this one. Villa will be crossing their fingers that Ollie Watkins is fit to play, but doubts will of course remain until we hear what Unai Emery has to say in the press conference. Last season this game finished 3-3. John Duran scored twice for the home side. He obviously won't be doing that this time around. And aside from that game, Liverpool's form at Villa Park is exceptional. They have won on 8 of their last 9 visits to Villa Park. They've beaten Villa 4-1 and 6-0, and Villa's only win in their last 10 home matches against Liverpool came way back in the 2020-2021 season when they won 7-2, with Watkins scoring a hat-trick and a certain Jack Grealish scoring twice. So there you have it. Those are your Game Week 25 fixtures and some key waiver picks for you to consider. I have got my eyes on Donyell Marlon if Watkins is ruled out by Unai Emery, and I also like the look of Leon Bailey for this week as well. They would be my top 2 waiver picks. The waiver deadline is earlier than usual this week because of that Friday night fixture. It is at 6:30pm GMT on Thursday the 13th of February. The Game Week deadline, and therefore the free agency deadline, is 24 hours later at 6:30pm on Valentine's Day, Friday the 14th of February. And the Game Week itself kicks off 90 minutes later at 8pm with a candlelit dinner and a game between Brighton and Chelsea. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the pod and go on. I am literally on my hands and knees begging you now to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or a nice review on Spotify or whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Pause the podcast right now, hit the pause button, get it done. It would be hugely appreciated. We're also on X and we're also on Instagram. Our handle is at FPL Draft Zone on both. And we are on Blue Sky, where our handle is at fpldraftzone.bsky.social. So that is it for this week. Good luck ahead of Game Week 25. Good luck ahead of those all-important waivers. And good luck ahead of free agency if you even need it. And until next time, it's bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.